Welcome to Cookware Junkies. We're going to talk about how to keep your knives sharp. Since we're cookware junkies and we like the toys and tools that go with the kitchen, we're going to look at a variety of styles of tools. We're not endorsing any particular one. We're going to talk about how the devices work, what's effective at sharpening, what's effective at maintaining, and your choices, at least 6 of them on the market. There's more out there, but these are the most common ones and the most effective. The first one is a steel. A steel is for honing the blade. You run the blade along it on both sides. It is to maintain your blade between sharpenings. More than any other device, this one is specifically for honing. It straightens the blade, will take any curls out of it, and will maintain your blade between sharpenings. This is one type of a drag sharpener, where you lay the knife on its spine and drag the sharpener along. I find these to be very effective for honing and maintaining your blade in between sharpenings. So it's a very effective device at that specific thing for daily maintenance every time you use your knife. Similarly, this is a drag type sharpener where you put the blade in it and drag it toward you. There are ones that will have multiple slots, different abrasions in them that will allow you to grind the blade to a higher degree of sharpness by going through those steps. This is classic. A whetstone, in this case an actual oil stone. Float a little bit of oil on it, very gently run your blade across at the set angle. This is what's worked for centuries and centuries, so it is effective. It does take a little bit of a learning curve and skill, but whetstones are still a very good way to go. This is an actual whetstone. You lock this onto the table, it sets the angle, you drag the stone along the blade. It's a very effective way to get a consistent stroke and a consistent angle. And that's the hard part. With that kind of whetstone, keeping your angle consistent can be very difficult. This one you get a protractor application with your phone, set the angle to exactly what you want, and you're good to go. You can swap out the stones to different grades of coarseness and grit so that you can be more effective throughout the sharpening process. So that's a true sharpener. This is the other version, the only electric one we're going to look at. This is the belt-driven Work Sharp, one of the early ones into the market. So it's got a nice little belt there that has a little bit of give, so it's easier on your blades than an actual grindstone. It's actually a very effective, simple tool to use at home. It has guides so that you can set the angle. Now the angle is only set, in this case, at 20 degrees, or an inclusive 40-degree beveling. So it accomplishes that, but it doesn't give you variation, whereas this you could actually set to a different angle if you chose to. For example, Japanese blades are often citing 17 or 18% as the desired angle of sharpness. And people who are in the industry look toward having that very specific angle of sharpness. But for homework, these are great and actually very, very fast and very good at recovery too. So 3 devices that sharpen, 3 devices that maintain. That's what we're going to look at in this article on Cookware Junkies. This is an old school whetstone. And in this case, old school. This one actually used to be my grandfather's. The label's about worn off, well over 100 years old. And this one is an oil-based stone, which actually is part of the reason it survived so well. You can see it's just barely got a little dip on the top from having been used. It does have 2 finer, coarser grits. So finer on one side, coarser on the other. We're going to start with coarse because some of these blades need some work. Key to it is just put a couple of drops of oil. Get it the length of it. The oil, like a whetstone that's got water on it, same idea, actually floats away the bits of metal as you're doing the sharpening. The bits of metal will clog the pores of the stone and actually diminish the abrasiveness. So you want to be sure and have a slick liquid coating so that your knives will get more effectively sharpened because the stone or the abrasive surface will stay abrasive longer. The key to these is to hold it like all of our other knives at 20 degrees, and this is what takes a little practice. If you're using the coarse side and the knife is very dull, they say about 6 pounds of pressure. If you're using the fine side and the knife is just honing, it's about 4 pounds of pressure. If you have a digital kitchen scale, you can actually set it on there and push down with your fingers and get an idea of how that works. So if you want to test yourself on that. So like all of them, you want to take the blade as if you're trying to cut the surface of it, drag it the length of it, and do it slowly. There's no rush. If you go quicker, you're going to have a tendency to skip, and when it skips, it isn't sharpening. So you want to get even pressure all the way out to the end with an even angle all the way out to the end. One of the few times I'm going to point a knife back at myself. So this is how it was done back in the day with no automation, no fancy devices. Just a very simple whetstone. You want to wipe it off every so often. I took off a little bit, not much in the way of findings on it, but definitely put a nicer sharpness to that edge. So this is a classic whetstone. I'm going to set that aside. This is the apparatus style of using a whetstone. I've already set this apparatus with a baseline for my angle here, and then this is set so that it will take the stone at exactly 20 degrees across the length of the knife. This knife actually has a pretty decent edge, so I'm going to start about in the middle for what comes with this. This is a 600 grit. You soak them in water for 5 minutes, so it is a true whetstone, whetstone. Pull this back. Put it in place. You can tighten it if you choose to. As I said, I've set the angle. I clamped the knife in rigidly into the holder. Made sure that it's far enough away that I'm not going to scrape the mechanism when I'm sharpening. And like all of them, you want to go into the blade, slow, smooth, all the way down the length of it, right off the end. And there's no rush. You're actually going to get better results the slower you go, so that you don't rush and skip. So we're going to make 3 passes on this side. And then most of these have a nice mechanism. Again, now keep in mind we're making the knife sharper, so in this respect perhaps less safe, but pull it toward you, flip it over, and put it back in place. And you're good to go with the next side. Same thing. I'm not really applying extra pressure with my right hand there. I'm just so inept as a right-handed person that I trust my right hand to guide it just a little bit more than my left hand. So again, very gently, the length of the blade, length of the stone, very slowly all the way along it. So there you go. I touched up that blade. Off camera, I'll go ahead and take it a step further and probably put a finer blade on it, but that's how these mechanisms work. They come with a variety of different grits, color-coded. This one actually came with a total of 10 stones, so that's a pretty good assortment for you to use. So these are whetstone apparatus that keep you at a fixed angle so that you actually get very professional results, the kind of thing that your professional knife sharpener is going to do when they take the knife and gently use an automatic grinder at a very set, fixed angle. We're going to take a look at the Work Sharp belt grinding type of sharpener. It is electric. It's actually a pretty compact, small unit. Has its own motor. Take a belt. You have differing grits. Slips in here pretty easily. Get it inside the track. Push down on the spring-loaded portion. Get it on the little drive. It's got good tension because of the spring. This is what makes it safer than using actual grinding stones. With that little bit of play, it's much easier on your blades. Grinding stones have none of that, so it's very easy to eat your blade away entirely with an automatic grinding stone type of sharpener. You want to be sure that you've got the belt on there straight so that it's not slipping off of the wheel. This is your guide. It gives you 20 degrees on each side or a total 40-degree bevel for the inclusive angles of the knife from both sides. So we're going for 20 degrees on each side. This sits right on here. You go ahead and start it up. Pick a knife that you want to go to work on. We'll pick this one, drop it in there. Just like other types of grinders, you don't rush, or any type of sharpener. You take it slowly through the length of the blade. Switch to the other side. Generally, before you switch to a different belt, which would be the next thing, we'd go to more of a polishing belt. You want to wipe the knife off so that you get the grit off of it. This one's actually put a pretty good edge on it. You can see it's starting to glint a little bit versus the body of the knife. One thing that's nice about these, they are good for serrated knives, but keep in mind when sharpening a serrated knife, you have a flat side on most of them and the serrated side. So when you sharpen it, unless you go to an actual pro who will file each of the serrations, which is pretty expensive to have done, you're sharpening the back side of it, which does give you better points, so it is more effective as a serrated knife. This one, because it has little serrations, it won't make as much of a difference. But this type of grinder, this type of grinding sharpener will work on a serrated knife. You put the flat edge in, same thing. Take your time, drag it slowly across. There's no rush. You're going to get better effect if you take just a moment or two longer to let it stay in contact with the mechanism that's going to be grinding it. So there you go. Actually, that one helped that one quite a bit. So that's the Work Sharp, one of the many belt type sharpeners that are out there, but actually a pretty effective unit for home use and fairly safe without damaging your knives. This is a steel. This is specifically for honing knives. If you absolutely had to, you could sharpen a knife, but it's not going to do a very effective job. And when you're using a steel, you want to take the knife, like everything else we've talked about, hold it at your angle and drag it along. No rush. Drag along the other side. I've seen people who like to do the quick. I've always wondered about the effectiveness of it, and it's not my specialty, but basically, the important part is the angle and the amount of pressure that you're using. The thing to keep in mind is a well-sharpened knife, what will happen is this beveled edge will actually start to curl over. And so by running it along a steel, oops, went the wrong way there. By running it along a steel, you actually straighten that back out. So it gives you more endurance, longer life between sharpenings, and takes it back to a sharper edge. So that's a steel. So it's almost purely for honing. If you need to do that same thing and you don't have a steel present, you can always do it on the back of another knife. Okay? You can hone a knife on the blade of another knife and accomplish the same results as those. And when those are made out of ceramic, we still call them a steel. Okay, this is one of the drag type sharpeners that you will see. This one happens to have ceramic discs in it. It's made by Henkel. It's an old friend of mine, so it's been around for quite a while. And it's effective. You don't want to put much pressure on it. Just take it and drag it like that. It is more for honing. You will see many of these have 1, 2, 3, or 4 slots in them with different grades of abrasion. So in fact, they will sell that as a sharpener in one slot, and then finer, and then finer, and then honing. They're okay for that, but not as effective as any of the stone methods. But anyway, remember, don't put a lot of pressure on it. Drag it gently through, and just like everything else, well paced, no rush to get through it. This is my favorite kind of in-between sharpening, honing, upkeep device. And what I like about it is, when you set the knife on the back, it's got 2 little titanium pieces in there, and you just set this on it and drag it down. And you don't put much pressure on it. I try to put almost none, but I can feel where the imperfections are. Like I noticed some right at the beginning of this blade is where it had the most of them. So I'm going to put a little bit more pressure there. But it is very, very effective at keeping your blades up, maintaining them so that they have a good, consistent edge. If you touch it with this once or twice, before you use your knife every use. You will see the sharpener maybe every couple of years, unless you've been cutting bones and really heavy stuff. So these are very effective. All three of these styles are very effective at maintaining the edge. The stone is one of the styles that you use for sharpening, along with the other ones that we've discussed.